I'm going to talk about Endurance, a solitaire game of Antarctic survival designed by Amabel Holland and published by Hollandspiele Games, and one that I've done an unboxing for, and I'll put a link to that in the description. But today is April 24th, and on this day, on April 24th, Shackleton and five companions launched one of the lifeboats, the James Cairn. Now, why is that relevant? Well, you're going to see when I talk about what happened in my game. But first, let's get some history on this. There is a excellent movie on this called Shackleton, which is stars Kenneth Branagh as the title character. And this is basically an Antarctic voyage that took place right in 1914, right as World War I was ramping up. Let's look at some of the stuff here. In 1914, as the world prepared for war, the Endurance carried 28 men towards Antarctica, led by Ernest Shackleton. They intended to be the first to cross the unforgiving continent over land. As the year drew to a close, the ship became stuck in a pack of ice in the Weddell Sea. The pressure exerted was tremendous, threatening to crush the ship like an eggshell. In October 1915, the hull began to splinter and the ship was abandoned. This is all in the rule book, by the way. To preserve resources, Shackleton ordered the weakest of the sledge dogs killed, as well as the carpenter's cat, Miss Chippy. A march was attempted across the ice with intent of reaching supplies left on the previous Antarctic expeditions, but was aborted as the party only progressed 2 miles in the space of 3 days. Instead, the men set up tents in the ice, dubbing it Ocean Camp. And so that is how you begin this game. You're basically at Ocean Camp with the Endurance still on the side. So let's talk about that a little bit. So this is the game. This is where I ended up. You start off on this board, and you're going to have groups of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of men on there. Your crew are represented by the actual people, with Shackleton is kind of an ever-present force on each of the boards. And when they're on the blue side, they are, active and at their peak capacity, well, as peak as you can get in these conditions. When they're on their red side, they are demoralized. And so this is kind of the internal clock. You're always trying to battle between keeping them on the blue side. Now, there's no winning conditions on this. I guess there is a rescue if you get that far. I've never gotten that far. But it's mainly just survival. You're going to be going through a deck of cards, turning over 2 for each one of these groups, and then resolving what is at issue here. You pick one to do the activity action, and the other one to do the test. And for this one, where the activity or the action is to hunt, and so you need to have 2 successes. But when you see a red, that means you have to demoralize. You have to turn over one of your people in that group to red. To do the test, you have to have that resource, and you would take this resource, and so you use it. And if you roll to see if it's exhausted, and if you roll over that number, or I said under that number, then it's exhausted. That's blubber. And if you fail a test, then you're going to have to turn over these people to their red side. Again, this is more. The red-blue is really the internal clock, and you lose if everybody goes demoralized. If everybody's red, you're going to lose the game. Matter of fact, there's more ways to lose this game than there are to finish the game. So you're going to have a deck of these things. They're going to have all kinds of different tests. They're going to have some events, and some of these events get shuffled in over time. And but they kind of keep the game progressing and going into phases. In fact, when you to get to this lifeboats event, when you pull this up, you move to this lifeboats board. But most of the game, or the first part of the game, I shouldn't say most of the game, you're managing your 5 groups of sailors and trying to get resources and use those resources to pass actions or pass tests or pass actions. And the actions can be, as you saw with the penguins, it's hunting. They could be morale, which you need to make sure that you have the right morale level, depending on what camp. You start off at Ocean Camp here, and your morale needs to be 13. That means you have to have 13 blue guys on the board. If you don't have 14, then you're going to have trouble. There's also a heat thing. That's when you have a food test or a food action. You need to cook your food. So that's what the heat is for. You use blubber to do that. You keep your supplies over here. A lot of supplies start off on the Endurance. But there's an event in here that the Endurance gets crushed and is gone. And when that happens, you lose all the supplies that are on it. And so that's kind of a sucky day in your life, because there's a lot of good supplies that start off on that ship and you don't have them anymore. Another tough decision is when you get to this lifeboat phase, you take all these groups and you put them on these 3 lifeboats. And, you cannot let any, there's no one left behind. So in this case, I had to leave a lot of dogs behind. So that was not the nicest or not the best of feelings, especially if you're an animal lover. A lot of dogs got left behind here. I was able to keep one here, and I kept Mrs. Chippy, although in the story, Mrs. Chippy was one of the ones to go. Miss Chippy's good for morale. There is also a test for, in hunting you can use guns. That's a good thing to have for that test. There's also, let's see what some of the other tests are in here. There is the sled action. That's when you use dogs. Of course, when you're on lifeboats, you're not doing that anymore. But the sled action actually lets you get supplies off of the Endurance into your supply. And so that's actually a good thing, but you only get those when you pull that card that has, a sled action. So it has the dog on it right there. And when you fail, you can lose dogs and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different actions that you're basically you're facing 2 of them. Either you're facing an action and a test with each group, and you're going to keep going through that you're basically pulling up events, and the events are going to press the story forward, and the story is going to follow the story of what is said in this book and what happened in real life, and if you watch the movie, what happened in the movie as well. It all fits together. Once you get to the lifeboat phase, this is really tricky, and this is where I lost. Lifeboat phase, you're going to deal out these lifeboat cards. You're going to deal out 5 to each of these lifeboats, all right? Then you're going to flip it over, and then you have 3 days to complete all the things in these lifeboats. And these are basically just like 2 pairs, straight of 3, triplet, sum of 16, snake eyes. And so you're rolling these dice here, and you're trying to meet those requirements. And if you meet it, great, you get to take that card and put it off the side, and any leftover dice, if you can meet the requirement on the next card, great, do that. If you don't, you leave whatever dice are left over, and then you roll for whatever active player you have, meaning blues, and then you use those dice plus any leftover dice from the previous boat, the immediately previous boat, and then you keep trying to meet all these criteria, but you have 3 days to do it. And I did. I mean, it was amazing. I was able to do it for this boat and this boat. However, I wasn't able to do it for this boat. I got down to 1 last card. And unfortunately, that's one of the ways to lose. If you lose the James Caird, that was the boat that Shackleton was on, you lose the game. And so I lost the game. So again, this game, you're going to lose more often than not. It's a solitaire game. Solitaire games have a tendency to be overly tough, because if they're easy, then why would you want to play them again, right? And so this one is a very interesting game. Once you get past the lifeboat stage, then you're at Elephant Island camp, but your morale is very high, your cooking's very high, and you got to go through another deck of cards, right? You keep going through these decks of cards, which are limiting your resources. And when you move on to the lifeboat stage, you can only keep 4 Well, no, when you move, the one thing you can only keep resources that you can fit into the lifeboats. There's one of the events that you can only keep 4 resources. So it's a very, very demanding game. Keeping the blue and red, trying to get the right resources, trying to keep resources to pass tests or to do actions. I mean, it's very, very tough game in that regard. But I feel like it really does follow the story very well. This is a narrative solitaire game. I mean, a lot of people talk about what's a narrative solitaire game. This is it. This is you're feeling like you're part of a story. You're reacting to the story. The decisions you make may affect that story, and it's a historical story, which most war games are in that regard. So, hats off to Annabelle. This is a very tight and interesting game. I like it. It's tense. It's tough. Now, what don't I like about? Well, the components are nice. These mats are really kind of good. These are kind of like canvas mats for the board. Very nice. The counters are the typical Blue Panther type production, the really thick counters, and they're very clear and you can see what's going on. And when you're trying to do an action, you roll dice for the number of crew members you have in the group. But your goal is to roll the lowest skill level. So like if in this group here, it's a 4, so I'd have to roll 4 or higher to win this test based on all the crew that are in there. And this is in the lifeboats. They would end up going be in a camp at some point. But when they get exhausted or when they get demoralized, I should say, then a lot of times their skills go up. I mean, that skill chest gets worse. The lower the number, the better, because you want to roll over it. So their skill, their test goes up. And so that's a constant management too of who do you demoralize, and some of them have special abilities, like doctors can get rid of wounds or face medical tasks automatically. But you got to roll to see if you when you do that, they get demoralized. Some of the characters have special abilities to deal with sledding. Some of them have special abilities to deal with hunting. Some of them have special abilities to ignore a failure. There's a lot of different combinations that are going on with these characters. And then of course, if you fail a test, then these people get demoralized. Whoever's on that far right on the penalty. So a lot going on here. And the components are nice, the cards are nice, everything's very clear, lots of dice in here, very good. So what's the downside of this? The downside of this is kind of the rule book. It's not the most, I mean, there's a lot in the first part that gives context. I like that. It gives the context at the beginning. A lot of rule books give you kind of the story or the history at the tail end. But it's not the clearest of rule books. I mean, there's a lot of text to explain what these 3 things are, but you're just sometimes you're not entirely clear. Sometimes you're not entirely clear on, where do the dogs go, for example. The dogs aren't in your supply. They're not in the group. They do go in the lifeboats if you have a few spots for them. But they're off to the board, and you just use them. You just pick one. I mean, not the clearest. Took a little bit of had to go to Board Game Geek to try to figure some of that out. So I mean, the rulebook could have been better. It's not horrible. It's there, but it's not ideal. And so I mean, I wish they would have spent a little bit more time on the rulebook there, especially in a solitaire game, because when you're playing against somebody, there's a chance that one of the 2 of you might figure it out as you're playing, or one of you might say, oh, I read it a little bit different, and therefore you've got a way to pull through or push through to get to the answer. When you're playing solitaire, it's just you. So if you can't figure it out, you can't get it, then you're just going to play it wrong. So that's the way it is. So overall, recommend this game. I lost. I've never won. I've never gotten too far to the lifeboats. I mean, you can lose pretty early in this game with messing up with your resources. So I like it. I recommend it, especially if you have any interest in this story, or if you like the movie, or have read about it, or just a history buff. Very compelling story, interesting story, what these men did and what they suffered through. So this is a game on that, and I think it portrays it very well and very close. and gives you some of those tense decisions. And it does it in an interesting mechanic. Some of the dice rolling and managing the red and blue, it does it very well. I just wish the rule book was just a little bit better. And this was nice. This little guide here was good. I didn't use this as much as I probably should have, and was hunting pecking in the rules. I kept forgetting that this was on here. So I would recommend you make a copy of this and keep that off to the side as you're playing the game. Or you can just keep the rule book flipped over. So anyway, there you have it. That is Endurance, a solitary game of Antarctic survival designed by Annabelle Holland. Highly recommend this. And especially if you have any interest in this topic at all, this is the game to go to it. So on this day in history, this is when the James Cairn was launched. And that's as far as I got in this game, and it was lost at sea along with Shackleton. Thanks all. Actually, a quick update. There is an event, the Voyage of the James Caird, which I never got it to be launched because, that lifeboat never made it. But there is an event that you get to where you leave Elephant Island, which is the camp right there, and you choose 5 men, and that's when you put the reserve deck, which is over here, and put the rest of the cards in the deck, shuffle them up, and then keep going on the camp marker. You're to the now trying to get to the rescue stage. But anyway, so yeah, I've never gotten that far, so I'm lost at sea. Thanks for watching.